The episode kicks off with a bang as the president of Theva Gems is attacked and thrown off the balcony. On the final night of the funeral vigil for the diamond tycoon, reporters speculate that his death was an accident. The heir to the 10 billion baht empire is said to be a toss-up between his eldest son Pubat and his second son Maven. The dead man's relatives order a young woman to leave, insisting that the area is for family members only. Pubat delivers a heartfelt eulogy in honor of his late father. Just then, the young woman who was dismissed earlier makes a dramatic exit mid-speech. A flashback reveals the young woman Kaimuk working for the Diamond Master. She is shown serving him food while his two sons argued over whose business idea was the best. The master valued Kaimuk's opinion and often sought her advice. That evening, the master's family threw a lavish feast for his birthday. His sons bent over backwards to please him by hiring the best chef and offering expensive gifts. However, their father remarked that all he really wanted is for them to act like men. The master then dropped a bombshell, announcing that Kaimuk was going to become his wife. They signed the marriage certificate in front of everyone. Maven congratulated the newlyweds and suggested they go on a honeymoon to celebrate. He offered to take the reins of the business, but his father chuckled and declined, saying he'd rather have a servant handle it. In the present day, Maven asks Mr. Crit about his father's will and when it was written, but Mr. Crit tells him to hold his horses until the day of the reading. Kaimuk is beside herself with grief over her husband's death, and her friend B tries to comfort her. While driving Kaimuk, Maven learns that she had worked for his father for 4 years. He finds it amusing that she had gone from a servant to a billionaire's wife overnight. Knowing she had spoken to the police, he orders her to stay out of his family's business. He hands her a bag containing 10 million baht and asks her to leave the house and not sign the inheritance papers, but she refuses. Frustrated, he stops the car and leaves her high and dry in the middle of nowhere. On the night the master married Kaimuk, he gave her his late wife's necklace. Later, Kaimuk expressed her unease about the master's sons, but her husband urged her to turn a blind eye and promised to protect her from everything. Just then, Pubat stormed into the room to confront his father about his mother's necklace, but his father told him off. Pubat, fuming, retreated to his room and took some drugs. Maven then barged into his father's room. Moments later, Kaimuk found the master dead on the ground floor. She told the officer that her master's death was a murder, but the cop stated that the case was closed as his death was ruled an accident. The episode ends with Kaimuk walking back to the master's estate. The second episode kicks off with Kaimuk recalling how she once told the police she believed her husband's death was no accident, it was murder, but the officer wasn't buying it, saying the case was closed and the master's death had been ruled an accident. Fast forward to the present, Maven is curious about his brother Pubat, but it turns out he's off at an urgent meeting. At breakfast, Araya asks if the family is still hosting the annual polo charity event. Padja agrees, saying it's a great way to honor their father's memory. Araya's son Shutter gets a warm welcome back from New York, and there is some playful banter about needing him in top shape for the polo match against their company's rival. But things get tense when Kaimuk, the late master's wife, shows up for breakfast. The younger generation isn't thrilled about her presence and bails. Araya tries to reassure Kaimuk, but it's not exactly heartfelt. Things go downhill fast when Kaimuk finds a hair in her soup. Araya makes a scene berating the house staff and threatening to pour soup on whoever messed up, apparently an old habit of their late father. Kaimuk steps in to stop the madness, insisting it's not a big deal, but Padja points out the hair is red, and so is Araya's. Later at the company, Pubat gathers the board to oust Maven, citing inappropriate behavior and the need to restore confidence in the company. Maven storms in, furious at his brother for orchestrating a vote against him. Their argument gets heated, with Pubat accusing Maven of dragging the family business through the mud. Maven dismisses the accusations, claiming he can erase any damaging stories online by day's end. The fight ends with both brothers refusing to back down. Meanwhile, B comforts Kaimuk, warning her that the family thinks she's just after their money and won't stop trying to push her out. Kaimuk insists she has to stay to find out the truth behind her husband's death. Araya later ropes Kaimuk into attending the upcoming charity event, determined to elevate her to the family standards. She even arranges for a designer friend, Peng, to design a striking ruby red dress, supposedly to help Kaimuk stand out. But it's a setup. At the event, Kaimuk sticks out like a sore thumb in red, while everyone else wears black or white. Gossip swirls about her being a lowly servant who married up, and she realizes Araya sabotaged her on purpose. When asked to speak at the event, Kaimuk freezes and declines. Araya swoops in to save face, delivering a polished speech and humiliating Kaimuk in front of everyone. Feeling defeated, Kaimuk retreats to the bathroom, while Araya basks in the family photo op. Elsewhere, Maven tries to bribe Crit with jewelry to rewrite his father's will in Maven's favor. When Crit refuses, Maven blackmails him by threatening to expose a video of Crit's daughter Amy, drunk and out of control. Caillou admits to Maven that she is pregnant. Maven flips out, implying she is just trying to get what Kaimuk has, status, stability, or something close to that. He tells her straight up that he doesn't want the baby and offers her money for an abortion, making it clear that if she doesn't do it, she'll be out on the street. Tien tells her he'll take responsibility for the child even though they can't be sure it's his. He believes they could be good parents, offering to live with her and start fresh. But Caillou reminds Tien that running away will only drag them back to their old lives, him a thug and her a prostitute. It isn't a life she wants anymore. In the end, Tien drives Caillou to get the abortion. He sits there heartbroken, crying for her as she goes through it. Later, Kaimuk has had enough. She tells Araya she no longer wants to be part of the family, stripping herself of any status by donning a servant's uniform. Araya relishes the moment, making Kaimuk kneel at her feet while she laughs. Episode 3 kicks off with Dom bluntly telling Kita that when they first started working together, he was convinced her brand was doomed to fail. He critiques one of her dresses, saying it looks like it's been pinned up like some hide you'd hang on a wall. Kita snaps back, calling him a jerk, while Abel tries to calm things down, offering some constructive feedback. He thinks the dress lacks character and needs more life. They then decide they need a model to see how the dress looks on a person. Dom zeroes in on B, the servant girl, suggesting that it doesn't matter what her face looks like and calling her a cheap fix. Abel agrees, saying she's cute and has a great body. Abel directs B to act like a caterpillar, turning into a butterfly. But when Kita tells B to change in front of everyone, B starts crying, humiliated. Instead of respecting her boundaries, Kita begins undressing her herself. Dom and Kita start taking pictures of B while she stands there exposed and distressed. Abel gives B his jacket to cover herself. Later, B is back to doing household chores when she gets a phone call. Her sister Bam updates her about their mother's condition, saying she still needs multiple dialysis sessions each week. B, holding back tears, promises to send more money. Bam offers to quit college to help with the financial burden, but B insists she stays in school, saying she'll handle it. Right then, Kita catches B on the phone and slaps her, yelling about the no-phone rule at work. Kita demands to know if B has finished working on the patterns for her collection. And when B says she's still working on them, Kita tells her to hurry up so she can show them off. Yupin informs Kaimuk she's been tasked with cleaning the storage room per Mrs. Araya's orders. As Kaimuk silently serves the family, Pubat mentions that the lawyer will read their father's will the next day and they all need to be on the same page. As Kaimuk cleans the storage room, she comes across a butterfly from her late husband's collection, triggering a flashback. In the memory, Kaimuk tells the master that the butterfly would probably love to go outside where people could admire it. The master, however, tells her he wishes to keep the butterfly with him forever, just like he wants to keep her. He promises her marriage and a life where she'll be free to spread her wings. At the club, Kita's having fun with her friends until Shutter shows up and things get awkward fast. Minnie, a girl at the party, starts openly flirting with Shutter, which makes Kita visibly jealous. Minnie needles Kita, suggesting she's got feelings for her own cousin. Kita doesn't take it well and leaves, but Shutter chases after her. Meanwhile, Kita and Shutter are in the back seat making out. Shutter apologizes for upsetting her and promises it won't happen again. The next day, Araya tells Kaimuk to stick around for the reading of the will. Crit starts reading the will, which lays out the late family master wanted his assets divided. Padja gets a chunk of Theva gems and control of a foundation. Araya scores cash, bonds, and more shares of the family company. Pubat inherits a resort and a sizable stake, but Maven ends up with the presidency and the largest share of the business. Pubat completely loses it, yelling that he's devoted 20 years to the company and won't accept the terms. He vows to investigate the will, but Crit insists it's legit and exactly what the master wanted. Araya rubs salt in the wound, pointing out to Kaimuk that she didn't get anything at all. Heartbroken, Kaimuk breaks down. Later that night, Kaimuk meets with Pubat and Padja, returning a necklace the master had gifted her. She says it belongs to Pubat's mother and that keeping it just doesn't feel right. Pubat accuses her of using the gesture to manipulate them, but Kaimuk insists she is sincere and reveals a troubling memory. On the night of the master's death, she saw Maven leave in his room. Maven was the last person to see him alive. Pubat demands to know why she waited so long to bring it up, and Kaimuk admits she is scared. Maven threatened her life before. Pubat thinks it's all nonsense, but Kaimuk vows to find evidence and expose the truth if the master's death wasn't an accident. The next morning, Pubat shows up at work only to find out he's been locked out of his office. When he confronts Maven, Maven informs him that his office has been moved downstairs to a less prestigious spot. Pubat demands answers, but Maven brushes him off, acting as if Pubat should be grateful for having less responsibility with the same paycheck. Meanwhile, Dom and Abel catch Bee sketching designs and realize she is the real talent behind the collection, not Kita. They're shocked, pointing out that Kita had been passing off Bee's work as her own. Kita overhears their comments and humiliated storms out to meet Shatter. She vents about wanting to run away, saying she can't handle living there anymore. Shatter tries to calm her down, promising that they'll build a new life in New York together. Back at her studio, Kita confronts Bee, accusing her of stealing credit for the designs and mocking her financial situation. Kita then forces Bee's fingers into a sewing machine, injuring her hand. Joke rushes Bee to the hospital to get treated for the bleeding. Later, Maven hosts a lavish party to celebrate his presidency at Theva Gems. He tells his son Shatter that he's been tough on him, but expressing confidence in Shatter's ability to take over the family business someday. Shatter thanks his father and hugs him. Kaimuk, now serving as a maid, waits on guests at the party. Some guests are surprised to see her in a servant's uniform, given her past status as the master's wife. Araya explains that Kaimuk prefers being in her comfort zone. She even teases Kaimuk, suggesting she might find a future husband among the influential guests. Maven unveils his grand surprise, a diamond shower that leaves everyone stunned. He makes a big speech about honoring his father's legacy and leading Theva Gems into a prosperous future. Behind the scenes, Bee has had enough. She releases Kita's dog and sends it straight to Kita's studio, where Kita and Shatter are being intimate. The camera strapped to the dog captures everything. At the event, Pubat addresses the crowd. He starts off by acknowledging that if anyone were to ask him who's the best person to lead the company after their father, he'd have to say Maven, but he makes it clear that titles and positions aren't what really matter. It's the results that count. Pubat encourages everyone to see what Maven has planned for the company's future. Maven jumps in next, promising the audience a glimpse of his vision for Theva Gems through a presentation, but before anything professional can play, the big screen lights up with something unexpected, footage of Kita and Shatter in bed together. The guests are shocked, and Araya even passes out. Maven scrambles to cut off the video, but the damage is already done. Meanwhile, Pubat rushes to Kita's studio and catches Shatter still in bed with his cousin. Enraged, he starts beating Shatter until Padja steps in to break it up. Later, Maven confronts his son. He lashes out, calling Shatter a disgrace and accusing him of ruining everything, but Shatter fires back, saying Maven should actually be thanking him. Without his help, things wouldn't have gone Maven's way after their grandfather died. Maven, confused, demands to know what Shatter means. Shatter threatens to spill everything. A flashback reveals the truth. On the night their grandfather died, Shatter had seen Maven storming into the master's room. Moments later, the master fell off the balcony. Shatter had taken the security footage and hidden it. Back in the present, Kaimuk, now in Shatter's room, stumbles across the hidden footage and decides to take it. When Shatter returns to retrieve it, he realizes it's gone. Maven shows up suspicious, demanding to know what evidence Shatter thinks he has against him. Shatter storms out of the house, furious. Maven isn't about to let things slide. He sends Joke after him to bring Shatter back. While driving, Shutter gets ambushed by a biker who starts tailing him aggressively. When Shutter pulls over, the biker jumps off and beats him up, leaving him bruised and bleeding in the middle of the street. Episode 4 kicks off with a flashback of Shutter driving drunk and running over a man. Joke goes out of the car saying they needed to call an ambulance because the guy was probably dead, but Shutter told Joke to get back in the car and insisted that Joke was the driver now. Shutter wasn't about to let this ruin his life or land him in jail, and he guilt-tripped Joke into taking the fall, saying it'd only be a couple of years in prison. In the present, Shutter's in a rough shape after the street attack. Multiple fractured ribs and bruise into his heart muscle. The doctor explains to Araya that things are stable but serious. Padja tries pushing Pubat to see past their family drama and help his injured nephew, but Pubat is over it, saying Shutter embarrassed them enough and deserves whatever happens next. Meanwhile, Maven isn't letting things slide. He reminds the doctor of all the financial support his hospital received, making it clear that if anything goes wrong with his son's treatment, that funding will disappear. Later, Maven confronts Joke, blaming him for Shutter getting hurt, even roughing him up despite Joke claiming he did his best. Kita wants to see Shutter, but Pubat shuts that down immediately, calling out their relationship for being inappropriate since they're cousins. He tells Kita she should just go to New York without Shutter. Kita calls Pubat a monster and says Shutter is the only person who truly cares about her. Kaimut confronts B, suspecting she had something to do with leaking the scandalous video. B says the people involved had it coming, but denies knowing anything specific about Shutter. Kaimuk later hands over crucial CCTV footage to Pubat, which shows what really happened the night of the Master's death. Pubat takes it straight to the police, suspecting foul play, since most of the inheritance went to Maven after the incident. The cops reopen the investigation and question everyone in the house. Caillou recalls how Maven was upset after taking the Master to his room, and Kaimuk shares how she saw someone standing on the balcony just before the Master fell. The cops seem ready to bring Maven in for questioning, but suddenly the investigation is shut down. Pubat is furious, but the detective explains that they've been ordered to drop the case. Pubat demands his evidence back, but it disappeared. Meanwhile, Maven learns who attacked Shutter, but decides to handle it personally. He also orders Caillou to yap like a dog. He isn't backing down from his power play either. He fires Pubat and tells him to stay out of the family business. Pubat warns that the fight is far from over. Kaimuk vents to Padja about how people with money and power can bend the rules to their will. Padja agrees, though she reminds Kaimuk that not every wealthy person abuses that privilege. The next day, Kaimuk texts B as she wants to know why she took a break from work. The servants then tell her Maven asked them to set things up to show a movie. Kaimuk leaves to see B in person instead. Kaimuk goes looking for B and meets her sister Bam. She introduces herself as a friend and asks if B is around. Bam seems surprised, mentioning that B hasn't been home in months. Kaimuk plays it cool, saying she just wants to check in on her. That night, Joke is discharged from the hospital and Maven comes to pick him up. Riding with Joke and Tien, Maven reminds them that Shutter is his only child and that seeing his son suffer is unbearable. He blames Joke for everything. He orders Tien to get rid of Joke by pushing him off a bridge. Joke insists he didn't do anything wrong, but then Tien steps in, confessing that he is the one who beat up Shutter. He brings up the abortion Maven forced Caillou to have, accusing Maven of killing his child first. Maven mocks Tien's pain over losing his child with Caillou. Maven orders Joke to push his brother off the bridge, or he dies. Tien reassures Joke not to blame himself and to look after Caillou. Tien makes the decision himself, he jumps. A gut-wrenching flashback reveals that Tien nearly killed Shutter during the earlier fight. Joke showed up in time to stop him, convincing Tien to beat him up to make it look real. In the present, Joke is devastated, staring at his brother's lifeless body below. Meanwhile, back at the estate, Kaimuk and the servants are gathered around watching the footage of B held hostage in a cage, begging to be released. The 5th episode kicks off with a flashback to when Maven and Pubat were just kids. They got into a fight, accusing each other of cheating, but their father shut it down fast. He smacked both of them and gave them this intense life lesson about accepting defeat and finding ways to win, even if someone cheats. Fast forward to the present, Maven has some news for Pubat. Early retirement, complete with a house to go with it. Of course, Pubat sees right through it and realizes its punishment for trying to get Maven arrested for their father's murder. Maven makes it clear Pubat's got a week to pack up and leave. Later, Pubat checks in with Padja about Shutter's condition and learns that without a matching donor heart, Shutter's chances are bleak. Pubat surprises Padja by urging her to use the heart as leverage to make Araya trade all her company shares. Back at the estate, Kaimuk sees B crying while watching TV and switches off. But Yupin turns it right back on. Yupin reminds Kaimuk that B was punished for breaking the rules and that everyone working there signed a contract agreeing to those rules. Caillou pleads with Joke to tell her where Tien is, sobbing that he's all she has left. Joke can't bring himself to say it, but hugs her as she breaks down. Padja later meets with Araya and offers an immediate heart transplant for Shutter, but only if Araya hands over all her shares in Teva Gems. Kaimuk checks on B, who's been released from captivity. She confronts Joke, pressing him for the truth about B's punishment and whether he tried to stop Maven. Kaimuk also hints that Tien's fate could be repeated if Joke doesn't speak up. Joke admits he knew everything but insists there was nothing he could do to stop it. That night, Maven corners Kaimuk and tells her to pose for a picture just like his father used to take. He manipulates her into standing right over the camera lens while he reminisces with a twisted grin. Kaimuk starts crying, haunted by memories of how her late husband, the former master, abused her the same way. Maven makes a sickening declaration that everything in the house, including Kaimuk, is his property now. The next day, Yupin gathers the household staff and lays out the assignments for an upcoming yacht event. It's a huge deal with VIP guests, and Maven wants total privacy. Caillou, Joke, B, and Kaimuk all get specific roles, while the rest are tasked with handling things on shore. Later, Araya signs away her 10% stake to Pubat in gratitude for saving Shutter's life. Padja passes the document to her husband, who tells her this move helps him bury Maven. Padja just reminds him not to forget his promise to her. At home, Maven thanks Padja and Pubat for saving Shutter's life. Pubat is ready to flex his newfound power and announces he's running the company now. Maven barely flinches, pointing out that getting only 1% more shares won't cut it. Pubat is confused until Maven explains that Araya transferred most of her shares to him beforehand. Maven acknowledges Pubat's effort but accuses him of crossing a line by using his son to pull this stunt. Pubat, furious and defeated, tells Padja to tell her father to take that heart back. The yacht party kicks off and Maven is entertaining his business partner Carlos along with the other VIP guests. He's all about making big promises, hyping up their potential dominance in the jewelry industry, and giving toast to future success. Carlos casually brings up Maven's brother, asking if he's going to be there. Maven brushes it off, saying Pubat has more important things to do. But not long after, Pubat does show up, mingling with Carlos and other guests. Maven is annoyed and warns Pubat not to mess up the event. Pubat fires back, asking if Maven forgot to mention that he fired him. He even jokes about spilling the beans to Carlos right there and then. Later that evening, Maven, Pubat, and Carlos sit down for a game of poker. Maven suggests they up the stakes to something more interesting. He tells Pubat to let Carlos win, hoping it will lock in a business deal. Sure enough, Carlos wins, and Maven invites him to claim his prize. Carlos chooses Kaimuk. Kaimuk looks to Pubat for help, hoping he'll intervene, but he stays silent and does nothing as Carlos assaults Kaimuk. As the evening wraps up, Maven, Pubat, and Joke board the boat to return home, but just as they're sailing away, the boat suddenly explodes in a massive blast. Episode 6 kicks off with a flashback to when Pubat was just a kid. He broke one of his father's precious glass boxes, and Yupin took the blame, earning herself a brutal punishment from the master. Little Pubat found her sobbing and chained up. Yupin urged him to stop wrecking the things his father cared about, but young Pubat had already made up his mind. He hated his dad and wanted to destroy everything he loved. Yupin hugged him. Fast forward to the present. After the yacht party, Maven, Pubat, and Joke are heading back home on boat. Maven questions Pubat's sudden interest in tagging along, accusing him of being dead set on ruining his life. Pubat doesn't back down, making it clear he won't step aside. Maven digs into old wounds, reminding Pubat of their father's harsh words that while coal could turn into a diamond, Pubat would never be more than fuel for destruction. Joke announces the boat is ready. As they set off, Maven, already buzzed, outright accuses Pubat of killing their father. Before things can escalate further, there is a sudden explosion. Rescue crews manage to save Pubat and Joke, but Maven is still missing. Pubat pretends to care, urging them to keep searching for his brother. Through a flashback, the truth comes out. Maven had started to lose consciousness from spiked alcohol Joke gave him. Pubat took the opportunity to push Maven overboard and ordered Joke to blow up the boat. He and Joke swam away, leaving Maven for dead. Kaimuk, meanwhile, manages to escape Kalos when the boat blast interrupts him. Back at the scene, the rescuers find Maven still alive. Caillou confronts Joke, furious that he didn't finish the job. Joke snaps back, saying it wasn't as easy as she thought. Another flashback shows Pubat confiding in Kaimuk about his hatred for Maven and desire to end it all. In the present, Kaimuk warns Pubat that if Maven survives, he'll likely be blamed and sent to prison. Pubat races to Maven's side, insisting he gets top-notch medical care. He even bribes the medics with his watch and rides with Maven in the ambulance. As they drive, Pubat reflects on their childhood, moments of fondness mixed with Maven's cruelty. Before they reach the hospital, Maven dies in the ambulance. Pubat looks more relieved than upset. At the funeral, Pubat gives an emotional but fake eulogy, painting Maven as a kind and hardworking man who inspired everyone around him. He uses the moment to announce his takeover of Teva Gems, pledging to carry on the family legacy. Yupin gathers the servants and hands out hush money, warning them to keep quiet about what happened on the boat. Kaimuk refuses the bribe and suggests planning a memorial for the late master. Pubat mocks her suggestion but gives her the green light anyway. Later, Pubat calls Crit, who reveals that Maven forced him to forge their father's will, leaving everything to himself. Furious, Pubat confronts Maven's wife Araya, accusing her of knowing about the will and hating him. He kicks her out of the house in a fit of rage, even pouring wine over her head for good measure. The next day, Pubat complains about bland food and orders Yupin to fire everyone in the kitchen, lashing out at the servants for taking advantage of his kindness. Pubat tells Pachara and his brother that their companies have been rivals for too long, and maybe it's time to find some common ground. As the new chairman, a majority shareholder of Teva Gems, Pubat boasts about dominating Asia's diamond market. His pitch: merge the companies and cash in on some serious success, or better yet, buy Teva Gems outright. He invites them over for dinner to talk more, and the two men agree to come over that night. Meanwhile, Kaimuk asks the police to do another autopsy. Padja confronts Pubat, saying now that he has everything he ever wanted, it's time to cut ties and get divorced. She wants her share of the assets as agreed, but Pubat makes it clear she's not walking out with anything. He reminds her that their marriage was a forced deal thanks to his dad, while Padja fires back, saying she's put up with enough misery to last a lifetime and deserves better. Later that evening, over dinner, Pachara and his brother ask why Pubat would ever want to sell such a powerful company. Pubat says Teva Gems was his father's dream, not his. He confesses he's never cared about the diamond business and just wants to live life on his own terms. He sweetens the deal by throwing in the family mansion, hoping it will seal the sale. The brothers drive away and surmise that Pubat's behavior up to deep-seated trauma from his dad. Back at the mansion, Yupin is horrified by Pubat's plans to sell the house. She pleads with him, reminding him that the master built it for their family. But Pubat dismisses the whole idea of family, asking where this so-called family even is, accusing everyone, including the servants, of only sticking around for money. Yupin later confides in Kaimuk, blaming herself for turning Pubat into the man he's become by protecting him for too long. Kaimuk reassures her that none of this is her fault. The next day, Crit shows up at the mansion, surprised to find it deserted with only Pubat there. Crit shows him a shocking video of the master signing his will, leaving his entire inheritance to Kaimuk and any heir born from her. Pubat is floored, realizing Kaimuk knew about everything from the start. Meanwhile, Kaimuk is seen in the master's old office, carefully storing a dead butterfly. A flashback reveals Kaimuk during her job interview, where she and the other servants were asked to strip down. Kaimuk's job was to clean and tidy up all the master's bedrooms in the house. Whenever Kaimuk was late, a sum was docked from her salary. She even witnessed Maven sexually assaulting one of the servants. The master once approached Kaimuk and treated her nicely. He chatted with her and thanked her for her services. He showed her his greenhouse and asked her to return that night to see the moths. She complied, and he called her special and different from the others, like a butterfly. He took pictures of her, made her drink, and poured alcohol all over her body before sexually assaulting her. Kaimuk then learned that the master was also assaulting her colleague Dao. She heard Dao sobbing every night and eventually saw how Dao took her own life. Initially, Kaimuk wanted to flee, but then she decided to stay and seek justice for Dao and the others. She got close to the master and promised to give him another son who would be a deserving heir, one who obeyed him and made him proud. The master married her and left everything to her. On the night of the wedding, Kaimuk drank his tea. The master hallucinated and fell to his death. She also killed Mavin by putting the same drug in his wine. In the present day, Pubat realizes that Kaimuk is the one who killed his father, but she smiles and claims that he and Mavin helped each other kill their father. When Mavin had the will changed because he wanted his dad's fortune all to himself, she accuses Pubat of killing him. She then admits that she is taking back what all the servants deserve because the master and his family were cruel to them. Kaimuk shows him footage made by joke of Pubat pushing Mavin into the ocean. She gives him two choices. He can either confess to everything and rot in jail, or deny it and take his chances. Either way, the evidence will still prove his guilt. He attempts to kill her, but all the servants show up and start filming. They begin hitting him and finally take their revenge for everything the family put them through. Pubat becomes a fugitive. One night, he gets mugged and killed. Araya starts acting to make money. Shatter gets a heart transplant but doesn't make it. Kaimuk becomes the owner of the mansion and lives a luxurious life with her friends.